Modifying a home to make it accessible is a long process. And every family has its own unique circumstances to consider. The thing that's the same throughout the process is that there has to be planning, and planning around the unique needs of the whole family and your lifestyle. And do not underestimate how long it takes to get funding. And don't set yourself up where you're ready to start but the money's not available. Well, all of this stuff, I couldn't have done it without Aaron Oak, because what works for one child is going to absolutely not work for another, potentially. So knowing what's available, they know what's out there, they know where to find it, they'll coordinate trials for you with vendors, and they know your child. And that makes all the difference. And otherwise, I wouldn't know where to start, quite frankly. I think it's always difficult to make a decision to modify your home for a disability. Some of it is acceptance. Like, to do that, you have to say, okay, this is for real. So it wasn't so much accepting his disability as accepting my limitation. That I've gotten to a stage in life, a stage in his care, where I can't do it without appliances to help me. That was actually a lot harder than I thought it would be. Every situation is going to be different, but if you hear enough stories, it'll give you a good idea of what you want, what you don't want, and that's a lot of the difficult decision making.
When Billy was born, we were living in the first house we had ever purchased, so we had no other children, and we hadn't thought about wheelchair accessibility at all. We had just gone in and bought the house we wanted to buy. Up until he was about 6 years old, it didn't make a lot of difference because he wasn't using a wheelchair all the time. We either carried him or he was in a stroller. So other than a tiny step at the outside of the house, it wasn't crucial to us. So when we decided that we could no longer carry him up and down the stairs to bed and to the bath, we had to decide if we were going to move out of that house or stay in that house. Anything we looked at, we would have had to do renovations on. So we decided we would renovate our own home because we could see potential for it to be an open enough space for him. I went to Aaron Oak and I approached the therapist to come out to our house and give any suggestions that she could give as to things that we could change in order to make it more accessible for our son.
So what your Aaron Oak therapist can do is help you prioritize what you need, given your family's needs, but they're very good at focusing and helping you focus on what's the highest priority, what's the most urgent need at the moment.
And I took out every book in the library on accessible houses, and I read them all. And after I read them all and got some ideas, I did a lot of research on the internet towards accessible housing and seeing what options were out there, what I needed to consider as far as flooring and lighting and mobility issues. We were very short on money, so we were trying to do it in the most economical way we could and still make things accessible for our son. We did a walkthrough with the occupational therapist and made some notations of certain things that we would need to change. Then we contacted a construction company to come in and do the renovations. So they helped us fine-tune it, but it was our vision. We were fairly happy with what we had done, but there were a few things that I would have changed, and I would try to make the shower bigger if we could. We just changed a living room into a main floor bedroom, and we changed a dining room into a large wheelchair accessible bathroom. We added a walk-in shower, a roll-in shower, and a large bathtub for him. So it was a larger than a normal size bathroom. The rest of the house was accessible to him because it was a fairly open space. We just widened when we took a wall down to add an additional room at the back. we left everything wider so that when he was going to be self-propelling in the wheelchair, he would be able to get around without bumping into things. His bedroom was big because it was a living room, so it had enough room for a therapy table and a large bed for him. We made the doorways bigger, and we added a ceiling track so that he could get from the bathroom to his bedroom on the track without having to put him back in his wheelchair. It certainly makes it a lot easier. We couldn't believe once we got his bedroom on the main level that we were actually carrying him up to the bathtub all the time. And how were we doing it? Well, we did it because we had to do it, and we did it as long as we could. But, you know, in retrospect, would I have done it any earlier? I don't know. I don't think that in our case I would have started any earlier because we needed that time to adjust as well. There's a certain level of emotional adjustment, like, well, oh, maybe my child's going to get a lot better and I'm not going to need to do that. But the longer you put off something, it can make it more difficult for you to manage in day-to-day living. Yeah. It isn't giving in, it's making things easier for yourself and your child, because it could just give them the independence they need to progress to the next step rather than, you know, holding them back. We were fairly happy with what we had done, but there were a few things that I would have changed. And one thing was that we used different flooring in different areas of the house. Now, I had read that that was something that was good for someone who had a visual impairment because they could identify where they were by changes in flooring. In our situation, I wouldn't do that again because the wheelchair and the Hoyer lift really were hard on any of the thresholds. So we had problems with those wearing from room to room because they just weren't sturdy enough to stand up to all the equipment. And we didn't make the shower big enough. I got a few books and looked up some specifications, and we kind of used the room that we had. And we probably couldn't have done anything in that amount of space, but we found that when he had surgery at one point and had to have his legs straight out, and we couldn't fit him all in the shower at one time. So it was okay. You know, I had never really thought of him having to be recumbent at any time, but when we had to do that, we had to, you know, kind of shower him in sections rather than get him all in the shower at one time. So that was something that we would do differently. I would try to make it bigger if we could. Yeah, if we could. But, you know, having said that, if I had had to make the shower bigger, I would have either had to choose between taking out the bathtub, which we didn't want to do because he enjoys his bath, or taking out an entranceway to the room because we had two entrances. And if I'd taken out an entrance, then it would be difficult for the other children. You have to consider every member of the family using that space.
So I don't think you're going to go too horribly wrong on the big stuff. You'll make a lot of your decisions based on what's not working for you. It's very specific to you, your family dynamic, your child. I could do a lot of things here because my son's an only child that wouldn't have worked for my friends necessarily because they have to have a living space that accommodates everybody.
I mean, the thing is, I was living in a two-story townhouse that actually had like 2 flights of stairs. So I would have to carry my daughter up the stairs to go to bed every night. And then probably about when she turned 10 or what, I must have been probably about 5 years ago, I moved her into my dining room. And then I decided to take my dining room back and moved her into the kitchen. But you basically had to step over her bed to get into the kitchen. So it wasn't necessarily practical, but I did not have to carry her except to take her for like a bath or whatever. And a lot of times I would go to my parents' house in the country because they had a bungalow. And it was easier to just get up like 3 or 4 steps than to like take her all the way up in my house. And then a couple years ago, we had to put my father, who had Parkinson's, into a nursing home. And then the issue was, do we move in with my mother in the country in the bungalow? It didn't make sense to move into the townhouse in Bramalea because we already knew that wasn't working that well. And then because the house in Caledon came with a lot of outdoor work and maintenance and stuff that we thought, why do we have to work so hard? Let's sell both houses, and this is what we got instead. And we always thought we were looking at a bungalow, and we had to consider also that we would bring my father home, sometimes to stay overnight, possibly, you know, in the future he may come to stay here at the end, who knows. But he's still a factor. And then it's my mother and me and the kids. So there's still like people trying to blend together, but everybody still wants to have their own space. So we couldn't find a bungalow that would have worked, that we thought would be large enough without us stepping on top of each other. And then we started looking at other options. And actually this was the first house I think that we looked at. Was it the first house we looked at that day? Almost. I think it was the first house we looked at, and then we looked at a lot of other ones, and we looked at bungalows, we looked at other side splits, and my mother and I always thought that actually this house was too big, but we never found anything kind of like in the middle as a happy compromise. It still was the best for what we were looking for. My brother was with us when we went with the real estate agent and looked around. And he looked at it differently than we did because, of course, I saw stairs and went, no way, because that's what I was kind of leaving behind. And he saw that it had the exact perfect location for an elevator. Oh, it was perfect because just that it would not take away from the house at all. It basically, you had a linen closet there. You weren't losing any room space. You weren't losing a room at all. Like some people have to lose part of their room or whatever. And again, because it fits in, you don't really even notice it. You know, it's just the door, but nobody knows where the door goes. You would think it was always here. It's a good location. And here we are.
I have one friend who did a remarkable job on her home for her daughter, but it required some creativity. They put an awful lot of thought into it, asking questions with their therapist to find out what is possible from it, but it worked very well for them. I think a good way to start the planning process would be to think of a day in the life. The parts that are working for you now, what would make it easier? Once you kind of have an idea for now, the next thing is to try and imagine what's it going to be like 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the line. Because planning it for a child of 8 is not the same as planning it for an adult of 18 or 20.
Oh, you keep looking at the camera, eh, Sophie? Yeah, he's there. He's there. He's there. Yeah, I know. There you go.
If you're buying a new house, enlist the help of your therapists so that you don't end up in a situation where you thought it was okay, but they knew something you didn't. There are resources there.
Good job.
It's not a problem calling up and saying, you know, what should I look for? I'm looking for a house. You know, what should I avoid? What have you found? Is there certain areas? Are there certain styles I should look at? You know, if possible, get an outline and go with them and say, you know, I looked at 3 housing designs. What do you think?
While we were looking for resale, looking new construction, we believe that for us, the new construction was our best option. This house does definitely suit us long term, without a doubt. It's always cheaper to modify new construction than it is to retrofit a resale home.
It's always true because you're not taking nothing out to replace it. You're just starting from fresh wood, framed, so they're just adding on.
All around, it was the best option, and we were very happy in the end that we chose this for us.
The planning ideally should start the day the child is born. You may not have the wherewithal to do anything. You may not even need to do anything. You can be gathering this information all the time. And it's not a matter of we have 6 months to figure out everything. Talking to other parents is a huge thing. Talking to your therapist is an incredible resource. If an issue came up, instead of saying like, oh, you know, I'm just going to live with it until we move, say, you know, we've noticed that this type of toilet is difficult with him. Is there anything else? So you could find out before you need to make the move that, oh, there are higher ones, there are lower ones, there are narrow ones.
You just have to do a lot of research and a lot of planning. Don't start before you're ready to start, but don't put it off too long, because the changes that you can make are going to make a big difference to your daily life and how easy it is for you to work with your child and to help your child. Not just for ramping, but even for a wheelchair accessible sink. If you can, maybe your child can't get up to the sink themselves, but if you can get them to the sink and they can start washing their own hands or brushing their own teeth a little bit, that gives them the satisfaction of being able to do something instead of having everything done for them all the time. So you aren't giving in by making things easier for yourself, because you're making things easier for them as well. So you have to see your child now and see their needs in the future.
A difficult part of the planning process is the acceptance that you have to do it, that the time has come, that your child's needs are such that it has to be done. Think about what you might want to do down the line. If it's something you're thinking, well, we can wait 5 years, maybe think about doing it now, before your child turns 18, well ahead of time. This is something you definitely need to look into while you might have the funding opportunity.
Well, you have to keep asking everybody and anybody that, I mean, for me specifically, it would be anybody and everybody that deals with my daughter, because it's through her that I need to find out that it's for her benefit that I need, to make the changes. I had a very good OT. Without her, I don't know where we would be, and if we would have gotten to where we are and got as much funding and been able to do as much with the money, if she wasn't around to say, try this, or maybe you need to call so-and-so, or you needed to first apply to see if they would even accept your application for funding. And then once you gave them the basics and they said, okay, now here is the actual form for filling out for funding, and get the quotes and fill in the needs and get occupational therapist or probably a doctor that would also be able to do like the medical side of things and figure out what was required for medical or physical reasons.
You'll make a lot of your decisions based on what's not working for you. It's very specific to you, your family dynamic, your child, because it's the biggest expense you're ever going to have. I mean, your home.
And the decision to roll costs into our mortgage, it's so minimal you wouldn't even notice the difference. It's just more comforting that we don't have to, at the same time we were buying this home, we have to worry about funding. Are we going to get funding in time? We were on a time constraint, and because of the costs, we didn't have to worry about jumping for funding and who we're going to get funding from. We can leave that aside and deal with it when the time comes.
It's only this much difference, right? And we save the funding that we get for other things that we decided that would be more important down the road. To use that funding for, like, I was telling you, vehicle. It's very expensive for the wheelchair lift, and so we decided to save that chunk of funding for that and just pay for most of the stuff by ourselves.
We were very happy in the end that we chose this for us.
I think just everybody saying that it was time to also, I have to look out for myself, because I can't be carrying a 15-year-old up and down the stairs. And also I think it convinced me also just that it all worked with the way the situation changed with my mom and dad, and my dad going in a nursing home, and we still wanted to be together as a family. So, I mean, I also am very lucky, I guess, that I kind of understood and could see the big picture and had the right people lined up to help me. I had a very good OT. That was my daughter's OT, who could guide me in the right direction of who to call and who to ask questions. And it's wonderful because Sophie can get around too. I mean, for her, that she doesn't have to be stuck in one room or one location. And here we are. Especially when we have more than one floor. And so she's able to get out in the backyard. I mean, the biggest thing, of course, is that she has her own room and I can take her upstairs, and I don't know how I did it before.
Having an adaptable home has made my life so much easier in so many ways. I actually don't know what condition I'd be in right now if we weren't in this house now. As he's gotten bigger, the teenage years, the growth spurts, When I think back, it really is one of those where you look back and go, how on earth did I do it?
Just enjoying daily life. This house just gives us so much more room. The layout, having certain things placed in certain areas makes it easier for us, like a second floor laundry. That's more luxurious to us. Having a nice ensuite bathroom, just the luxuries of what a new home can also give the family, even just for us for enjoyment, because I think it's important for us. Just to have those little things that make life easier, not just easier for us, to make us happy.
Crash!
Oh dear.